All right, folks. Well, we are live, so the dogs are gonna have to wait. Hello and welcome, folks, who are joining us on YouTube, our family from Learn Power BI, all of our YouTube followers. Hello and welcome. So today's topic is who makes a better Power BI professional? Is it the business user or the techie? So I'm excited about the topic, but first of all, let's say hello to everybody who is on. And I already see Loretta Sue. Always good to see you here. Hari is here. Jenny Holbrook says hi. Courtney says afternoon. Nerman is here. Christina. So if you can, do type in where are you joining us from. And of course, we'll do a quick round of intro on the speakers here. And let's see, Christian from Romania. Harry is from Detroit, Michigan. Gary from Connecticut. Robert is here. He's monitoring the chat. So if you want your questions to be answered, be nice to Robert. He's going to queue them up at the end. Kevin Bob is here. Good to see you again. Matthias, always good to have you on the channel. Matthias says greetings from Germany. We have Courtney from North Florida. All right, folks. So let's. So again, the topic is who makes a better Power BI professional, business user, or techie. And the way we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about the old world, just to set the context, and also because some of us may still be living in that old world. Ouch. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the new world, where things have changed already in some organizations, where things are headed. And then we'll come back to the question, the $1 million question. So who wins, right? Is it the business user who has an edge? Is it the techie who has the edge in this new world? And then we're going to round it up by maybe some thoughts, pointers on, regardless of what your current role is, regardless of where you're coming from, either if you're coming into this new world of Power BI from the business user background or the techie, what can you do to improve your chances, right? And of course, then we'll queue up some of your questions. So folks, let's do some introductions. So folks, Raul, Ian, Stephen, definitely tell us where you're joining us from and maybe a bit about yourself. Yeah, Raul, let's start with you. Awesome. Ian? Oh, wait, you're on mute. The mute button. Ooh. Yeah. All right, that's awesome. Steven? Oh, shoot. Oh, hold on. So people can't hear me, it seems. Is that Robert? Can you check in? What is? Oh, they can't hear the speakers. Sorry, guys. Let's see. I don't know. Yeah, that's one thing I missed. Oh, I see what's going on. Okay, so let me try again. I'm sorry, guys. Tech issues. Let's see. Okay, let's have Raul say something. So Raul, yeah,
This, we were saying, yeah, let's see. Hopefully, we're back on. I guess
yeah.
part of the Techie versus Power BI discussion, very appropriate.
Uh,
And I don't know if they could hear
okay,
me.
okay. So Robert, do a check for me. Maybe I can. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a lag on there. Oh,
Can
great.
somebody try and see something?
Test,
Yes,
test.
yes, yes. Now it
One more
works. Now it
check.
works. All right, all right, all right.
All
Okay,
right.
so hey, folks, what you missed was an amazing round of introduction from Raul and Ian. I guess, do a quick version of that again. So Raul, go again, mate. Second time is always the best, anyway.
Second time, yeah. I'm located in Costa Rica. I work out of Costa Rica, but my clients are located in the U.S. and Europe. I'm an engineer with over 20, an engineer manager with over 20 years experience, but I now help business users. I've been doing business data analysis for the last 3 years,
All right, awesome, Ian.
which is what I did for 20 years, and now I'm focused on it.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's
Currently
phenomenal.
now focused on, so I do consulting for companies that do projects, especially like construction. They do lots of projects or large projects, and they need to keep a handle on their whole portfolio. Early career was kind of hacky coding, and then I moved more into the business realm of product management and that kind of thing for quite a while. I'm
There.
happy to have my hands back on stuff.
Great. All right, Stephen. Oh wait, we can't.
I'm sorry. Yeah, here I'm
All right,
back.
there we go.
Okay, yeah. My background is in wealth management. I had a wealth management firm in Chicago for many years. Sold that and moved to California, my dream state, and got into corporate FP&A for 7 years. About when Power Query was coming out, I got into self-service BI and then Power Pivot. In the last 7 years, been in corporate FP&A, consumer packaging goods company, supply chain, anything related to that domain is really where I specialize in. But really coming from a small firm background where you had to accomplish a lot with a little, it was really unusual coming into an environment where they accomplished so little. And so Power BI was just a godsend for me, and Power Pivot just fell in love and said,
Yeah.
this is where I need to spend my time going forward.
That's awesome. So, folks, let's dive into the topic, and we're gonna start off with a little bit of the old world. And just to be clear to everybody, well, we're gonna be focusing on today's session from that individual perspective. So I'm imagining myself back there in the bowels of Microsoft, right? I mean, and I came from a business background, but imagine either a techie IT person or a business user who's like sitting there and, well, they've had their experience in their focus, but like, what do I do? Where's this world headed? Now, of course, there's a different perspective from maybe the organizational leadership or the business leadership perspective, where they kind of have more controls. Like, where do we put BI? We're planning to do a session focused from that perspective in February. So again, this is from the individual perspective. So from the individual perspective, what did the old world look like? And maybe I'll play the techie, but let's hear from you guys. Well, I don't know. Should I go first for the techie? Let's hear from you guys. So, what did the old world look like for the business user? I mean, how did they work? What were their opportunities if they wanted to create a bigger impact, if they wanted to do more? Yeah, what was the situation like?
I can
Yeah,
give a
yeah,
start here. So this would be the last company that I worked at was, good size, had large professional software teams and whatnot. Um, and I think what you got into was kind of these two different modes, right? You had whatever you could accomplish with Excel and
yeah,
pivot tables and maybe some macros. And then
yeah,
if you wanted to go on to more the software side and do something more scalable, then you were into, needs a business case. That business case is going to be competed against lots of other business cases. The product manager who's making the business case, who is, me or my peers, has to kind of decide whether you're whether I can make a business case for $50,000 over here, or whether I've got to focus on the multiple $100,000 business cases and hope that that smaller thing just kind of takes care of itself, I guess,
yeah,
right? Because you can't build hundreds of business cases for all those medium-sized problems. And so
those things that would fall in the middle would really just kind of get lost. Like if you had an idea that could save the company $100,000 over the course of a year, I don't know, like how do you get that done? And the mechanisms for getting the attention on it and the resources on it were just sort of siloed.
Wow. Gosh, that was so good and so well put. So there was the stuff that you could do yourself, and there was the stuff you could make a business case and like, yep, everybody would rally behind. But what about the stuff in the middle? Well, let's go deeper. Let's talk about the reality of both ends first. And the middle is clearly a problem. But what about the stuff that you did yourself? What did that life actually look like? So Raul or Steven, who would want to tackle that, right? So again, in theory, it looks simple, like, yeah, I can do that myself. But, that world would not be that clean, right? It would get messy. It would end up with a whole bunch of Excel sheets everywhere. Steven, you're nodding your head. Let's go with you. So what did that end of the world look like for a business user?
Sure. Well, it was a lot of, first of all, pivot tables, of course, was kind of a paradigm shift. But you ended up stitching together these clunky pivot tables and then feeding off them, and then something would change, and then everything would break. And it was like working with links all over again that would just break. But you thought it was, you were accomplishing a lot, but it was only relative to what you were doing before, which you didn't even have the pivot tables. And so at any rate, they really changed how you operated as an analyst, but you knew that you were still lacking anything dynamic in the way that you really intuitively wanted it to be.
Yeah, and I remember the time where I built something and I didn't know what to hope for. To hope for whether that, everybody liked it or everybody hated it. Because, obviously, if everybody liked it, I'm like, oh yeah, nice. But man, then it became a ball and chain around my neck, right? Because they, oh, Avi, this is great. Can you refresh it weekly? And I'm like, oh, shit. It took me like so many hours. And of course, that's not the end of the thing, right? Then they would come back and say, oh, Avi, this is great. Can you add this thing? And it just became like a death by 1,000 cuts. So Raul, what about you? So let's jump to the other end of the spectrum that Ian talked about, where it's like, oh, now you got to make a business case for the IT. And had you dealt with that? What was your experience there? Oh, I think Raul's connection seems to be spotty here.
Oh, looks unusually still. So he may be frozen.
Yeah, I think he's been going in and out. So Ian, let's go back to you. So had you dealt with IT trying to make a business case? And
absolutely. So that was a lot of my job in the later years of my last role, right? Was making multiple $100 to $1 million kind of business cases, right? And it takes a long time. You have to kind of build it up. It takes months to kind of prepare everybody for it. It's a big ask. And so you're trying to get all your ducks in a row. So it's not agile, right? It's you're asking about sometimes next year's money, right? So you spend March, or maybe let's say May through August, getting ready to make an ask in August, September for next year's money, right? So not super agile for sure.
Boy.
And that money is already now committed to certain objectives that, you have some flexibility around next year, but you pretty much have to be focused on what you're asking for.
Yeah, and I know that was super hard because, for one, there's so much of a lead time. I was like, oh yeah, right. We're talking about 6 months and a year in the future, and then nothing is guaranteed, right? I was like, oh yeah. You can make your best case, and then at Microsoft they would do this kind of red line thing. It's like, oh, you're below the red line. Sorry, try again next time. It's like, what? So
you might win half of your business cases.
Yeah. And of course, even if you did, because the lag was so long, there would be this whole problem of they would deliver it to you and you would say, no, that's not it. And you would say, oh, this is what you asked for. Look, here's the requirements document. Like, no, but that's not what I meant. You interpreted it totally wrong. Plus, the business has changed, right? The requirements have changed in like the 1 year. And, oh, boy, right? So even if you won, you could lose. God, that would be so painful.
Yeah, and I would say that, it was more the latter problem. Like, we're agile enough that it wasn't off of a requirements document, right? But as you got into any given problem that you were trying to solve, and you realized the real context of it, because you can't get that deep a year, in advance. So when you get into it, you realize you want to, there are a bunch of things that you should be doing differently and some things you shouldn't be doing. And what do you do about it then, right? So, and meanwhile, honestly, if somebody good was over on the business side, cranking away, chipping away at the problem from, with even the Excel tools, like maybe that problem doesn't exist at the same level that it even did when you made the ask, right?
Yeah.
It's now half of what it was. So it's a really interesting problem.
Never mind. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Raul, we have you back on. Do you have any war stories here? They're working with IT, grappling with IT or the stuff as a business user. Yeah.
I guess right now that would be a great example. Like I'm having trouble with my computer and the internet, so you can see I changed. I did, and similar to what Ian was saying at the beginning, I think, as I got cut off, apologies for that. The cost and the complexity of doing something that was, being continuously updated and that you could really look into things at a timely manner was so expensive and complicated. Unless it was a sure win, it wouldn't get done. Thing is, you really had to deliver the ROI. If the ROI wasn't a sure thing, it would get discarded. So constantly I found that a lot of money was being left on the table because the cost of going for it was just so much. And that's anyway, that's it. It was just unless it was a sure win, it wouldn't get done. So a lot of insights were lost, and a lot of improvements were lost because of that. It was so complex.
Boy, yeah, and I can definitely see that, right? Because I see BI as exploratory, right? And it's a lot of times it's impossible or really hard to like, what is a sure thing in BI? I don't know. Like, I mean, you kind of get in and explore, and I always talk about the peeling onion. So cool. So I'm going to make a quick case for the tech side, and then we'll move on. We'll talk about how the world is changing. So I spent a little bit of time in tech, and I'm glad I did in IT because it gave me a taste of what their life looks like, and it sucked as well. And when I was in tech and IT, what I hated was that business users, man, they were like, right? I mean, they were always they felt naggy to me, right? I mean, they were always asking for stuff. It was an endless barrage. I'm like, guys, are you ever going to be happy? Nope, they're never going to be happy, right? They had 100,000 list, long list, and they, give it a, you didn't give it. And the worst part was that we would work really, really hard to give them all of the stuff that they were asking. And then we wouldn't even know if, are they using 10% of that, 5% of that? And it was funny, right? I mean, so we would see this in BI, but I would also work with data center folks, and they had this joke, and I guess it applies equally in BI as well. And they said the only surefire way to find out if a server is being used, and this was, before virtualization and all that stuff, they said was to pull the plug on it. You pull the plug and see if somebody complains. And that was the same thing with reports. The only way we could be sure that, is this report, like, it should be, do something, we would stop sending it. We would stop refreshing it. And really, when we had a leader who was courageous enough to try this approach, 9 out of 10 times, nope, we would never hear back. So it was really frustrating from the tech perspective as well. All right, so again, I talk about the old world and the new world, but unfortunately, it's quite possible that some of you are still in the old world we described. So, they're just labels. But let's move on, because there is a glimmer of hope, and I know I get really excited about it. But what could the new world look like? And we have seen glimpses of it, maybe. Maybe I'm sure we have worked with some companies who are kind of stepping into the new world already. So what is possible? So Stephen, let's start off with you. So old world we talked about, a lot of things broken from both sides. What is possible in the new world?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about agile self-service BI being something that is exploratory. So with the technology we have now, we can find out answers to questions we never would have thought of asking before. It just, there was no sure payoff for it. And the ability to effectively merge the worlds of IT and have the mind of the business user and the technology that puts the power in the business user's hands to do that kind of exploration and a very low risk environment. And sometimes you get your greatest payoffs because the technology makes it so readily available that these insights and these techniques, by just flipping things around a little bit, all of a sudden, voila, it hits you. And I didn't know I was looking for that. So the technology is helping you discover yourself, the way you want to do business. It's helping you learn things you didn't expect to learn and didn't even know you were looking for. So that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, that's great. So folks, this is so spot on. So of course, a lot of you know that January we are launching our program for the Power BI consultants, pro level, and I think there's a link in there. You see learnpowerbi.com/pro. You can go there to find out more information. But I bring that up because I was talking to my coach about it, and it's like, well, like, why would anybody sign up for a program in this day and age? You can Google anything. And he said something which is kind of in line with what Stephen is saying, is that, well, sure, you can Google, what you know you don't know, but how do you Google what you don't know you don't know, right? And that's what Stephen is talking about. Sometimes you're digging into the data and you find an insight you were not looking for. And there's no other way to find it than exploration of data in the agile manner. Raul, let's hear from you. So what do you see in the new world which is different than the old world, which gets you excited as maybe kind of that business user persona?
I agree 100% with what Stephen was saying, and we've discussed this before. The fact that you can ask anything so easily and in an agile way, it didn't work, something. I always give the example to my clients initially, like, you were trying to group something. Okay, can we group it by client? Maybe. Okay, we group it by client. Can we group it by client and product?
Yeah.
In Power BI now, you can just drag and drop. And then normally that in the old world would have been, 3-4 days or a day or an afternoon with the Excel. And then you come back, you're like, oh no, sorry, I meant the other way. A product and client. There was that internal groan of like, okay, there's another.
All the formulas.
Now you say, okay, no problem. You just drag and drop, and that's it. What else do you want to throw into the mix? You don't want to group it. So that ability to really dig deep and find root causes, or as Stephen was saying, like, I didn't know we can ask that. I didn't know I was missing that. So cost effectively and so quickly, and so it's truly is astounding. It's amazing. It's very exciting, and as more people find out that you can do it, as you mentioned earlier, the self-service BI and agile way is really going to change things, and more people are coming on board. And I find it very often with clients is like, once you do one or two things, like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Could you do this? And you can see their mind just explode. It's like, I knew that would have been useful, but it would have been so complicated and expensive before.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it going, just exploring things that we didn't know we could explore. And it's very, again, I keep going back to it, very cost effective and time, not only in terms of money, but of time.
Yeah, great. Ian, would you like to add something?
Gosh, yeah, reduced cycle time on those things, I think is the hitting the nail on the head. When, part of the complexity of the old world, of the larger and old world, right, was that even after you got your business case and you got your team, you've got your team of 8 people, let's say, doing coding, they're specialized, but the couple of weeks that it takes to, at that point, to get even something in a very agile, kind of process in that environment, because you have to bring it in, break it up among all the specialists that are going to code different parts of it. Somebody's going to do the data, somebody's going to do the front end, somebody's going to do the whatever, right? And then bring it back together. It's still not like, okay, 2 people sit down operating on live data, make the changes, learn something, make a few more changes, have a decision or, a potential framing of a decision and go, right? It's just a longer process, even at its most agile, when you have a larger team involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, great. You know what? I can't wait. So let's go to our core topic. So if we talk about this new world, right? It's so blended. I mean, frankly, who do you call a business user? Who do you call a techie? And I mean, I was doing a heck of a lot of tech. So of course, my story, quick version, is I pretty much pushed out our BI team, on which company was spending millions of dollars every year. And I made them redundant. Business users sitting in a business group, right? I mean, they were not needed anymore. Like, oh, cool, we can stop doing that, I guess. There was a lot of infighting before that, but some story for another day. So I was pretty techie, but I would describe myself as business user. And I'm sure there are techie folks out there who are finding themselves that they're interacting, working closer with the business teams. So there is that, dilemma or opportunity, I don't know, right? And then, of course, I mean, frankly, in a way, this whole topic is up for debate. Because I said techie versus business user, who makes a better Power BI professional? And none of those terms are like set anymore. They're fluid. We can't define who's a techie. I don't think so. Not anymore. We can't really define who's a business user. Not anymore. And that term that I use, Power BI professional, what the heck is that, right? And of course, in Power BI consulting, in a program to train and coach Power BI consultants, I always say the first lesson that you get is don't be a Power BI consultant, right? Don't lead with Power BI. It's like, oh yeah, I do Power BI. No, go out there, be helping businesses, be a problem solver, right? I solve business problems for this community. Oh, using Power BI, right? Power BI is just a tool. So notwithstanding that, kind of the terms are what they are, but in this new world, who do you feel does one role have an edge over the other? I mean, so much is in flux, but does a business user really have an advantage, or the techie has an advantage in this new world? Are they better positioned to thrive in this world? Ian, let's hear your take on this.
Yeah, this one's tough. I mean, there's so much context, I think, that goes into each one, but I'll try to take a couple, right? Like, yeah, if you're a techie, as in a software professional working on a team of software professionals in an IT department that has a big you know what I mean? Yeah. You're already kind of down a path, and it would be really hard for you to even back up enough to pay attention to go, oh, I want to go over here and do this other thing, right? Yeah. Like, even if you were going to change companies or, downsizing, whatever, you're kind of in that software mindset, and you have the technical ability to solve. And like you said, sometimes there's this feeling of users are a little bit of a pain. I'd rather just, solve the technical thing. I like the logic. I mean, I even think about the differences in the roles on there. Like, you have a software developer who loves logic, right? Yeah. And the abstraction. You've got maybe a data person on one of those software teams, and they're sort of a rare, unusual bird. They might make a little bit of a turn toward, something that was more Power BI-ish, but they're different. Those are different people that are both techie and on the software team. And so I think they're going to have trouble paying attention to it for a while until it really continues to grow and get adopted widely. I think the business users are the ones that are sitting there often with this problem. And the only way to solve it right, old world, was either ask, wait, hope, pray, or maybe, Excel, dungeon, a little bit of suckiness, a little bit more suckiness after that, right? Yeah. So I think they're the ones sitting there with the fire from the problem perspective and need to move forward, like are compelled to move forward towards something better. So I think that there's going to be a period here where, business users do that because they can now, because that's what the technology now enables. And so there will be a rise of business users much faster than like techie users kind of coming down the curve of techiness for a while. I do think there's a point at which it, especially when you have like a very enterprise level BI, and then I think it, there'll still always be lots more business users than super tech users, but I think it starts to blend a little bit more at some point. But early on here, it feels like business users are the ones that make the move, and so they get to know it.
love it, man. Oh gosh, so I'm gonna just say it again because it was so awesome, and I just want to make sure I kind of processed it. But the way I got what I got from Ian's discussion was one, if you think about it, there have been a lot of techie users who never really stepped into the business arena, right? I mean, they never cared. And again, whether that's good or bad, and again, I know we are painting with broad brushstrokes here. I'm sure there are a lot of techie IT folks who engage really closely with the business, know all about it, and so forth, right? But there was certainly a community which kind of didn't care. It's like, yep, let me do your stuff. I mean, they didn't possibly never even talk to the business user, never even really understood the business. I've certainly worked with a lot of techies like that who didn't really understand. All they understood was kind of logic. And like, yep, here's my report here. What that report does, how does it serve, and so forth. They never had the context. And of course, if you link back to, if you think about it, the original problem that I talked about for the techie, which is they didn't know which reports were being used and were not being used. I mean, imagine how much of a missing context they have. Like, if you were dialed into the business, how would you not know, right? I mean, you would know, right? I mean, you would know right away. But the fact that there was such a big problem, I think that is a red flag, right? Oh boy, it's something, there was a disconnect. But if you look from a business user perspective, just think about it for a second, and we were never averse to tech. In fact, we always resorted to tech. We business users were a lot more willing to step into tech and roll up their sleeves and do what was needed. But there was a challenge. Man, we didn't have the right tech, right? It was again. So Ian had this kind of he painted like two ends of the spectrum. So we either had Excel, which was this poor man's workhorse kind of thing, and yeah, it worked, but it was clumsy, death by a thousand cuts, right? We had that, or we had these high-end tech solutions. God, the SQL Server Analysis Services, the old one with the MDX. And I've looked some MDX. I can't write any MDX at all, but it's scary stuff, right? You had to. So there was nothing in between. There was nothing that was good and approachable for the business user. So business users were never averse to tech. That's what I think. And they would step a lot more into tech. What has changed now is now we have that middle option. And I think Steven was talking about it. He was talking about how, the old notion is that good, fast, cheap, you can only have 2 out of 3, but Power BI kind of delivers it all. So it's been a boon for business user. So maybe they have an edge. Let's see. Raul, let's, what do you feel? Do you see, what do you have from your perspective in this new world? Who has an edge coming in?
I think a business user, they bring in, having been in there, not only being a SME, the subject matter expert, and really knowing and having been in there, but looking at, as you were saying, the bigger picture. Somebody that understands the overall thing, the cost of something, like what is a business looking for? They're looking at it, expediting things, of getting things faster, that like understanding the whole package. Is very important. As an example, as I said, I'm an engineer. Early on, I remember working with two drafters.
Yeah.
One was an engineer, and he knew how to do AutoCAD. He knew how to do lines. And when we'd be talking, he's like, "Can you move the beams up X, Y, and Z?" He's like, "What do you mean?" Those lines are beams. Okay. Oh, okay. He knew how to use everything perfectly. He knew how to put hatchings. He knew how to do lines thicker. Another guy he had put himself through engineering school as a drafter, and he stayed drafting. This guy was invaluable. He would not only do the things that I would, he was asked to do, but he would catch things. And it's like, what about this? Why don't we do this? I was doing this, and I can see that they don't fit properly. So the fact that he knew what he was doing with the program was invaluable. Yeah. I would say that it's the same with Power BI. Business analysis, like you can do slicers and you can do stuff, but knowing what the business needs brings in a lot of additional invaluable additional input that really helps and gives a huge added value to the service. And you end up working, like with a lot of my clients, I end up being a sounding board for them. You know, we can go back and forth. And what about this? You know, I remember me 20 years ago, I did something and we had X, Y, and Z. Have you guys thought of this? Oh, no. And it wasn't even to do directly with Power BI, but it was the business. So I think, definitely. There's a lot of tech part of it. There's a lot of coding, but being a business user and having been in the trenches brings in invaluable additional.
Love it.
value.
And hey, loved your story there. So actually, that's what I'm going to ask Stephen. So let's make it personal. Stephen, what has your experience been in this? Because I know you have straddled this world for a long time. Tell us about your personal experience.
Yeah, well, what I've found is, as in many things, if you know why you're doing something, the how is kind of secondary. You'll find a way. And as a business user in the finance world, I understood implicitly the pain of the need for a solution, and not having those solutions was something deeply frustrating. And so, having suffered so much, when you get these tools that you now have bend to human will rather than humans having to bend to IT will, that was the magic when I realized that, my goodness, this is speaking my language. I'm not, I used to think in terms of, when it's time to get involved with data was when they get serious about technology that didn't require endless coding. That's when DAX, I lit up. I realized that this powerful formula language would unleash things in a way that, and learning Power Query, for ETL, my philosophy used to be, my God, I used to think, if I can't plug my nose and before I run out of breath, I better have the coding done, because I have real work that needs to be done in the finance. Decision useful reports need to be made, decisions need to be made, and every minute I spend coding is lost time. And the new languages with Power Query and the graphical user interface, unlocking MDX code and DAX being so powerful, I knew that now it was finally worth my while to use these tools, because I knew why they were so important, why these tools were speaking my language, unlike previous tools, which I thought were making fun of me. I'm like, are you kidding me? You want me to write a paragraph of code just to do this? And then Power Query and Power Pivot and DAX, I immediately lit up and I said, wow, this is speaking my language. They understand I need to get to solutions much, much quicker and more powerfully and dynamically. And because I knew why it was so important, I rushed at these tools in a way that maybe a more tech-oriented person really wasn't feeling it. They knew and they could see the value, but I could feel the value. And I think there was a difference there.
Wow. Boy, man, I tried to take notes as fast as I could, because there was a lot of good stuff there. I think I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again. But I'll call out some things which really caught my attention. This idea that instead of humans bending to tools, which I think, I remember that time, right? You had to work the way the tools worked, or, the techies guided you there, right? You even needed help, right? You were kind of helpless on your own. But what if the tools adapted to us? And of course, this whole no coding, low coding, and I love the direction that this everything is going. Because, of course, he mentioned DAX, and I remember, gosh, the simple stuff like distinct count. Oh, I remember falling in love with it. I'm like, oh, my God. Oh, gosh. And I remember when earlier I would teach Power BI, I loved showing distinct count. So I love, so people get all into, get really techie. But what I really love about Power BI is the stuff that's really simple but really valuable. And there's so many examples, right? And distinct count was one. Time intelligence is one. So distinct count, I would set that up, and I would poll the room, and I would say, how many different ways do you do distinct count in Excel, right? And then of course there's this if formula or something, and you could do a pivot table and drop that in a row, and there were a few other tricks like that, and then I will show them the formula and distinct count. So it just makes life easier. And of course, it's not just Power BI now. So I've been finally delving into Power Apps a little bit, and the premise of that system. So this whole ecosystem is moving that way. There is, of course, Power Flow, Power Automate, whatever it's called now, and there's Power Apps. And again, if you look at all of these tools, of course, including Power BI, it's no code or low code. So that is awesome. And I was also flashing back to Excel, a beloved tool, kind of, actually I would say, kind of a more of a love-hate thing. Again, we loved it because it was so flexible, but that was also its weakness because you died by 1,000 cuts. But even in there, man, I ended up I was pretty much a programmer. I mean, a lot of Excel users are programmers because, man, the amount of macro code that I've written, the VBA, and it wasn't fun. Frankly, macros weren't fun either. And of course, macros are kind of weird because, of course, most people get started on macros by recording a macro. And recording is easy. But then if something one cell moved and you had to change it, man, I either had the choice to then I would do Alt F11, dive into the code, and after a lot of Googling, right? And maybe I would fix it. Or I had to re-record the whole thing. And I'm like, what? Right? So, of course, now that I've seen Power Query, it's like, why was it ever designed that way, right? So anyway, so love this new stuff. So great, Stephen. Love that. I love that perspective. So let's get to our last kind of topic, and then we'll go to Q&A. So let's say, what can an individual person do to keep going in this direction, right? So certainly there's a lot of promise here. Stephen, let's continue with you. So I'm a business user. I'm sitting here, and I love kind of Power BI, and maybe I've taken a few tentative steps on it. But man, I'm also a little bit scared. I'm like, and that question that comes in here, like, oh, but I'm not a techie, that sort of. So what would you say to that person?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, Avi, in your materials that you've produced, you really hammer home something really important, and that is getting some guidance on maybe and mastering the 20% where you get the most value. Having somebody who's an expert, or at least beyond you, guiding you down that path, giving you kind of a framework to work within, and just something as simple as master the 20% that gets you most of your value. I mean, that's incredibly powerful. And I remember it was kind of like the little boom that goes off when a golden gem is dropped on you. You're like, thank you. I needed to hear that. That was invaluable to me. That helps narrow my focus. Now, once I can define the problem a little bit better, I can find out, well, what are those 20%? And I need to master calculate, some X and whatnot. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm just emerging or just starting in this environment with your training materials and starting to move along in them. And they've been invaluable. I literally don't know how I could possibly go down this direction without being mentored and guided and given a mindset, being given the technical aspect as well as the psychological to how do you approach this. You need to be able to define what you're trying to accomplish, and you need guidance like what you provide to do that. Quite frankly, I personally couldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I always think about it this way, right? So even, of course, for the Learn Power BI program versus the Power BI Consultant program that we have, I always think about that. Does it increase your chances of success, your probability of success, and can it get you there faster? Right, so folks, so again, I mean, I followed the same journey, right? I left my job in Microsoft, and man, I struggled. And oh boy, it's some of you have heard my accounts of that period, and it was hard. But then, of course, I was lucky enough to find a program for entrepreneurs, and it was amazing. It was like, whoa, yeah, this program is for me, and so different than an MBA. Because this was really focused. And actually, the person was so upfront. It's like, hey, I don't know everything, right? I mean, I'm sure you could learn a whole lot more MBA. I just know one thing. I know how to build an online training business, and I can teach that to you, right? So and that kind of changed everything. So, of course, we approach our program the same way. I don't know everything, but man, I do know this. And can I help? Can I increase the probability of your success? Can I get you there faster? Can you get there by yourself? Could I have gotten here by myself? Well, maybe, but I think the probability of success would have been lower, and maybe it would have taken me longer. Ian, let's hear from you. What tips would you have for, again, that business user who's kind of on this edge, ready to leap off, but also, definitely you always have those fears and doubts, like, oh gosh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Power BI has this really nice, like, sloped beach entry that feels great. And then you hit this part where it gets kind of steep and you're like, whoa, this just got technical. And you realize that no code is not a thing, right? There's low code, right? But it feels really off balance for a while because it is more technical than what we're used to at that next level. Yeah. And I would just say, be patient with yourself, as I try to be patient with myself about it, but, have a way that you keep working on it and layering it in. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think, maybe two things that I think the more professional software developers have going for them that we could learn from, right, is they're kind of used to languages changing. Oh, I used to program in Java, and now it's .NET, and then it's something else, right? Yeah. And so they're used to that relearning languages and whatnot. And I think there's just a certain amount of that. And, just like you could learn a different foreign language or a different domain in business, it just takes a little while. It doesn't like pop in instantly, right, to be fluent in something. And then the second is that when you see a problem a few different times, you can get good at abstracting things. And I think that software developers who've been doing it a long time, especially, are good at abstracting and noticing, oh, that's that pattern, right? Yeah. Whereas when you're just starting with Power BI, everything looks fresh and new, and it's the first time you've seen that problem. So like in your course, Avi, I know you've got patterns, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, if you're dealing with something like this is a pattern that you can use, as opposed to reinventing the wheel, right? And so you start to layer in those patterns and be patient with both, that's the gist.
Love
but
that.
You'll get there.
Love that.
I'm not a super techie person, but you just keep plugging away and you get techier every day.
That is awesome. And actually, so of course, what I loved was so for the techies out there, I mean, I was going to kind of try to go there in a bit, but what Ian said is awesome. So of course, we also see the edge that techie people have, that they're used to kind of this going through this curve. By the way, so folks, on the Zoom call, you won't be able to see it, but you can Google it later. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And my coach talked to me about this. And, so of course, the thing that we struggle with is that, man, the number one question that I get from people who are interested in this Power BI consulting path, or, just to progress in Power BI professional, they keep asking me is that, Avi, am I good enough? Am I good enough? When am I going to be good enough? And I was kind of getting tired of that question. Like, I know that doesn't matter. Go out and help somebody. But I spoke with my coach because I wanted to understand, like, what is it going on and how can I help them? And he pointed me to this Dunning-Kruger effect. And the short version of this is that if you are asking that question, am I good enough? You probably are. Now, it sounds crazy, right? But again, Dunning-Kruger, look into it, right? So it's studied and all, because the learning curve, the way it starts is that folks who don't know enough, they come in thinking they know everything, right? So initially you're like, oh yeah, I know everything. And again, I mean, it may or may not apply to everybody, but generally, so that is really interesting. And again, this is something new that I heard, so I'm still kind of processing it, but it has this nice graph it just talks about and so forth. But what Ian was saying was that the tech folks have gone through that. So they're probably used to feeling that discomfort. And imagine if you've done it 3, 4, 5 times, well, yeah, you're going to be better off. You can have, so again, so I always talk about kind of fear and courage and all that stuff as well. And of course, courage is not the absence of fear. Somebody who doesn't have fear, they're not courageous. They're probably psychotic, right? So, they have something wrong with them. So courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is simply, so what differentiates the two people that I see who frankly succeed on programs versus who don't? And they all have the same set of fears. All the classic ones we talk about, am I good enough? Fear of disappointing your clients and blah, blah, blah. Fear of, I'm going to do everything and it's going to suck my life away and put my family at risk. So they all have the same fears. The only factor that's different is that one set of folks take action in spite of the fear versus the other that doesn't. That's it. And it's so stark that I'm like, wow, can that really be the difference? But I see it again and again. All right, cool. So again, the tech folks have gone through that fear cycle a few times, so they would be better prepared for this. So that's awesome. I'm glad that's an edge for them. But again, business users, watch out for that. Watch out for fear, and you know, so look out for that, and and yeah, just kind of be patient and said. Awesome, Raul. Any last thoughts on this one?
Let me see. Learning by yourself, yes, you can. From the group, I think it's the way to do. I remember when you were pretty much interviewing me to see if you would take me onto the group, and I was going on and on about DAX and how happy. And you said, no, hold on a minute. Being a consultant is not about learning all the DAX and knowing everything perfectly. And it was a big. I was very proud of myself, and initially I was a bit deflated, but it made me think, and it really helped me to be like, no, hold on a minute, it's a bigger thing. You can learn that. You can go into a forum and learn that little part. It's the bigger part. What you're saying, yeah, the Kruger-Dunning effect, yeah, the imposter syndrome that we feel is huge. And being in a group like this really helps you of seeing different problems, seeing different approaches to it, different little tricks. And as Ian was saying, as you start looking at it, you start to see a pattern, not the exact pattern, but I think Stephen was maybe referencing Pareto effect. You know, when you learn the 20% that really gives you a big return, you start seeing patterns. Again, going back, I always think in terms of stories or things that I've experienced. I was never a big gamer. And once I started playing a game, after 2 months, I couldn't move forward. And a friend of mine had a little brother who came in within a week and finished it, because he went and he said, oh, see, in here behind this door there is something. Usually if you look underneath something, and I found something, and I didn't know you could do this. These little tricks. So it's the same thing with this, you know, like programmers do have an edge in the terms that they've thought about it. Is like, okay, this thing could probably be attacked the same way I used to do it 10 years ago with Java. Oh, there you go, it does work. We don't have that. They do have an edge that way, but as you get into it, you'll learn to look underneath the flower vase.
Oh man,
in
awesome.
Dungeons and Dragons or whatever that I never knew to do. The kid did it in a week, and after 2 months, I hadn't been able to do anything. Being in a group like this really helps you. It has helped me, and as you with more clients and different problems that you never would have thought of asking. So anyway, the techies have an edge there. Definitely, but we can, and having that business background always will give us an edge, I think, in the long run.
Oh, that's great, guys. So that was awesome. Let's switch over to Q&A, but thanks to Raul for taking me back to a size of mystery. I was thinking of Mario, and I remember playing that as a kid, and you had to jump and hit those bricks, and for somebody new, it was like, what? Why am I supposed to hit those bricks? Well, sometimes you get prizes there, so
you'll get points.
You can get used to it. Awesome, Robert. If you can turn on your video. I know sometimes it's and let's see, the first question that you've queued up is from Matthias. And Matthias is asking, how can you encourage Power BI? Oh, wow. So this is diving in a bit, but that's a good one. How can you encourage Power BI desktop users to use explicit measures instead of implicit? Most only need some, it seems. Well, that's a good question. So, of course, I'll set up a bit of context. So implicit measures are where you take a column, let's say a numeric column, which has your sales amount, let's say, and you just drag it onto a report. And it sums it up. And actually, you can choose to average, min, max. And that is what's called an implicit measure, because it actually does create a DAX measure under the hood. You just don't see it. You don't see the formula. You don't have control over it. Versus you go to your ribbon at the top and you click new measure, and then you say sum of sales amount. So, of course, in my course, I say, implicit measures are dead. Always use explicit measures. But, well, while we're on this call, I'll admit that, hey, I drag columns in reports, and sometimes in a hurry, and I do that. But maybe let me ask you guys a different way. That I know the moment when I discovered kind of explicit measures, and so was there like a aha moment? It was like, whoa! If I define my own measures, I can do this. Was there a moment like that for one of you guys?
Well, certainly. I mean, for me, when I learned the concept of explicit versus implicit measures,
Yeah.
I realized that almost immediately with implicit, you're running into a wall. As opposed to explicit, you start to build the building blocks of
Yeah.
more and more robust analysis, and it kind of violates the spirit of getting into something just to immediately do a worst practice that runs you immediately into a wall. It will satisfy an immediate need, and that short-term thinking is really going to bear out maybe the second, third, or fourth time you use the tool, and then you're like, well, geez, I wish I'd have just done it the right way from the beginning as a best practice. I mean, you could build Franken tables and have one massive table in your data model too, and rather than breaking things out into dimensions and facts, technically you could get away with that for a while, but eventually you're going to realize, I shouldn't have done that either. So you have to have just balanced short-term satisfaction with longer-term benefits of best practices.
Yeah, I think reuse is certainly the key. I mean, that's a big one. Once you start defining explicit measures, yeah, you can reuse them as building blocks to build other measures. That's great. So Robert is saying there are not that many questions here. Let me see if something new came up.
Can I have a whack at that one, Avi, while you're looking?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a phase that people who are new to Power BI go through where they can't even find all the settings. Like, how do I format that thing in the visual? And you know what I mean? Like, and they're frustrated that they can't kind of get to it. And I think that's a little too early to push on the implicit measure or explicit measures, right? They're still just trying to find their way around. And so sometime after that, I try to get to, okay, this is the stuff you do more in Power Query, data model, and this is the stuff you do a little bit more because, on the other side. And, I don't know. I think you work up to that one, maybe not totally gradually, but not right out of the gate, because it can be one of the harder things, even though, some of them are pretty simple. Yeah. Some are not. So, if they feel like they're accomplishing and learning fast, I think that's a good spot.
Well, that's I love that, Ian. Thanks for sharing that, because I think that approach kind of applies in a lot of other things too. So what he's talking about is the timing. Is that, somebody who's just kind of starting out and figuring out stuff, there's no point talking to them as like, before you get started, let me just warn you, if you ever do an implicit measure, you're not my friend, right? I mean, that's just pointless, right? So you gotta, and I always say, so sometimes people ask me kind of a similar question. It was like, oh, people in my organization, they're not like open to Power BI. I've been trying to give them Power BI and they're resisting it or whatever. They hate, and I say, well, so you gotta look for their pain point, right? I mean, frankly, they don't care. Nobody cares about Power BI. They don't care about you. They don't care about any of your solutions. What they care about are their own problems. So if you go in there and you say, and so that's what I would do, like fix a problem. So that's from that perspective. So again, with Ian, what he's saying is that, well, you gotta let them maybe dig themselves in a little bit of a hole, right? Where they say, yeah, I'm doing this stuff and all that stuff, and they say, oh, cool. And as long as they have a line of sight to that, cool, awesome, I see you've done a lot of this thing, but you might want to calculate the profit percentage as well as a next step, and that would be better if you had these as explicit measures. So that's maybe that's a good thought there. Cool. We got a new one. Kevin Bob. Robert, thanks for queuing up the question. He's saying, how can business users overcome the learning plateau? It starts to get very techie very soon. Ooh, so we have, talked about it. And I'm going to, so again, folks, you can't see it on screen, but I'm going to bring in the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'm just gonna kind of sound it out. So initially it starts off with like, where you don't know anything and your confidence is 0, because again, right, I mean, you don't know anything. But then according to this study, according to Dunning and Kruger, pretty quickly it's like, oh God, this is awesome, I know everything. And again, or close to it. Basically, confidence is really high initially. And then, there's not even a plateau, there's a drop in confidence. Actually a severe drop, right? So he's saying initially you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, confidence is really high, but then you kind of start second guessing yourself. It's like, oh, there's more to this than I thought. And then you go to the stage, which sounds really dangerous, which is, I'm never going to get this. And man, we've all felt that. So guys, we've all felt that. But then you do get across and it says, oh, it's starting to make sense. And then you do know a lot and you do have confidence, but you also have respect for how deep it goes, right? So, and again, right? So, I mean, boy, actually, this does sound like the kind of emotion that went through. So, what would your tip be? Like, I don't know, maybe it's a mindset tip. Is it a technical tip to help somebody through that? I think we have talked about from the technical perspective. Maybe let's talk about it kind of from the emotional perspective or a mindset perspective. What can a person do, think, believe to help them get through that easier, faster?
Once again, I think if they know why they're doing this and they know the power that they're going to unleash to help people who are driving business results, there's a deep satisfaction in knowing that you're a force multiplier. You're helping people do things they could never do before. Yeah. And from a mindset standpoint, if you remain keenly aware of why you're doing this and the pain you're solving and how you're helping people do more than they ever could, once again, never lose focus of the why you're doing this and the pain that you're saving and what you're really accomplishing is you're making lives much, much better, including your own. Yeah. Then the how becomes secondary. But once again, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'm intimately familiar with the peak of Mount Stupid, where you're the ultimate confidence at the beginning, near the beginning, and you're the stupidest you'll ever be. You got to be self-aware and know where you are on that curve, because you have to, know that you're going to go down into the sea of despair, and you have to be prepared for it and know where to go for solutions to help guide you through that sea, and you'll emerge on the other side better. And I think as a business user, you have the advantage in that you have perhaps hopefully have a deeper understanding of exactly why you're doing what you're doing, and it'll help you stay focused and motivated.
Wow, love it. Oh God, that cuts deep, mate. Ian, Raul, Ian, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I have been like once you're kind of past it, now let me back up. Okay. People see Power BI and they see the fancy dashboards, right? Mm-hmm. And they think that that's what they want to build, or that's what somebody wants you to build. Okay. The reality is that just like Excel has those, single sheet, it's just a list, but that list, highly refreshable, like every day or multiple times a day with one chart on it, can be really useful and powerful. And so I think that if you've got a population of business users, and some of them are going to, go much further in Power BI, and other ones are going to stay a little shallower by their choice, that's okay. Yeah. If you help them to get to that kind of first level reporting where you can pull out and get a list and put a, filterable by a chart, and you're not trying to build a dashboard, right? You're trying to build a decent report. It can feel really like valuable. Oh, I can replicate that. I can do that again and again on lots of other problems. And so that's one. And then the other is like, just, I don't know how to put it, but ultimate patience, right? Everybody's talked to somebody who knows a lot more about a subject than they do. And, if your answers are know-it-all-y, right? Yeah. That's different than if it's like, oh yeah, totally been there. I have screwed up way worse than this, and just like helping them through whatever challenge they're trying to solve for as their partner, as their, I like to say, wingman, right? Love it. That's what I try to do. And, sometimes I get it wrong, but I hope, I hope to try to get it right more often than not.
Yeah, that's awesome. Raul,
what I would say, let me see, repeating what you guys are saying. Yes, patience. Mm-hmm. Do realize there is light at the end of the tunnel. I would say join a group like this, just from the community. What I've learned, and I've hit some roadblocks, and I've gotten help from the community. From the guys. Some I realized I never would have solved those, and some other ones that were super obvious afterwards, but they weren't obvious to me at that time. Just join a group like this. Join a group like this. As we've been saying, patterns, you will start to see the patterns. They're not exactly the same. It's not getting a book on patterns, but ways of attacking a problem will become apparent if you stick to it. And we're not saying months, years.
Yeah.
A couple of months, keep at it. You will realize that the problems are very similar.
Yeah.
A couple of different codes, a couple of different measures. But the main thing I would say, the key thing, join a group like this, because from the community, you'll learn a lot. You'll find people that will help you.
Yeah.
And you realize that the patterns are fairly similar. Are very similar.
Love it. Love it. Thank
One
you.
more.
Yeah, go for it.
Solve a problem you care about. Like, don't solve problems you hate, or don't solve problems that are super boring to you, because you need that curiosity and drive to pull you through the harder bits. Sorry.
Love it. No, that's great. So, all right, folks, I'm going to recap this stuff. And I know we've gone a little bit over time, but this has been really good stuff. So let's start with what Ian said, solving problems you care about. And I think that is critical. And there is something that I feel like I need to do more in my program, because I do see people tripping this over a lot. Which is, guys, the first serious initiative you take in Power BI. I mean, there's this learning mode, but at some point you're going to start doing something. And I've seen a lot of people trip up on there. And a classic mistake is you take an Excel report and try to redo in Power BI. And again, that's great if you're in learning mode. That's a great training exercise. But if you're trying to accomplish something, like, oh yeah, it's going to be my big project, or shining beacon as I call it, that is one of the worst ideas, right? Because for one, it's really challenging. So I'll admit, guys, where I am right now, when I start working with a client and they show me that, oh yeah, Excel report, redo this in Power BI, I say to them, do you have something else, right? I mean, is there anything else that we can start with, right? Because again, so I have this whole thing about Shiny Beacon project where I look for something which is easy to do, hard to do in the old world, easy to do in the new world, and really valuable, right? So I think I need to do more to guide my students there, because I've seen a lot of them trip up. So if you kind of nail that right, yeah, you something care about, which is valuable, but again, you don't tackle this big bear. So that's key. Something that Steven was talking triggered this memory. And so guys, this was one of our Pro Plus members, right, in the Power BI consultant program. And they, in a group coaching call, they talked about how they felt inadequate, how they felt like they were not there, and they, technically and so forth. And I knew that they were already working with clients, so I asked the person, I said, well, what does your client say, right? I mean, you're feeling you're out of depth and so forth, but what does the client have to say? And he said, oh, my clients love me, yeah. I'm like, what, right? So he was, right, I mean, you were helping somebody, and that person is saying, man, this is awesome, this is so helpful, and they were just dismissing it. I said, oh, yeah, that doesn't matter, right? I mean, I don't feel I'm good enough, so I'm going to keep struggling there. And I'm like, man, good luck with that, right? I mean, and frankly, like, who are you to judge, right? I mean, gosh, how big of an ego you have that, oh, yeah, only I can judge. I mean, shouldn't your client have a say in this? Shouldn't the people you're helping have a bloody goddamn say in this, right? That, man, you're great, right? And if they're saying, you're dismissing it. So, yeah, man, we get ourselves, we can, if you can't succeed if you can keep getting in your own way. So, man, that was kind of painful to see somebody go through that. So, and I think it was Steven again, or maybe Ian. I got my notes mixed up. But there was this idea about, I think you all touched on it. So Ian said solving problem you care about. Steven talked about the why and the how. And what that triggered for me was something that Tony Robbins says. So this was in his Netflix documentary, and the interviewer asks him that, man, you put so much energy on the stage for these 5-day-long sessions. How can you even do that, right? It has to be hard. And he just says one thing. It's easier to be pulled than pushed. And think about it. And that's how I know I lived my life. I was like pushing myself. I got to get that promotion. I got to do this. I was pushing. But then I discovered Power BI and my life changed. Because I was not pushing, right? I was being pulled by this. So find that, go for that. love what Ian said. It's a choice. So again, if you look at me, I mean, I look at people in the industry, and guys, I've talked about it. I struggle with imposter syndrome all the time. Man, every single time I have to use calculate table, I have to crack open the reference book, and I feel like a fool, right? So, but yeah, I do most of my work with like 5 DAX functions. I look at others who are writing page-long DAX measures, and frankly, I don't even get why. Like, I never had the need to do that, you know? So yeah, I have chosen not to go deep. I've focused on kind of helping businesses, solving business problems. So you have a choice, right? So what Raul said, and again, there were so many gems. I feel like I wanna internalize them myself. Was Ian and Raul both talked about the patience and you kind of enjoying the journey, not be the know-it-all. And some of you may remember, man, this was years ago. This was like 2 years ago, and I wrote an article about Power BI Village, living in a Power BI village, and where I talked about being a Power BI badass. And I said, we're Power BI badasses not because we know it all, but we know that we don't know it all, but we don't let that stop us from helping others. That's a freaking Power BI badass. So be out there. And the last thing for the community, yeah, I mean, I've again, for my entrepreneurs, my own journey, I've always been part of a community, except initially when I just left Microsoft. So yeah, that is certainly helpful. So hey, I want to thank our speakers for all of their awesome ideas. I know I learned a lot. I'm probably going to go back and watch this again. Thank you for all the listeners. Thank you for Kevin and Matthias for their questions. And so, folks, we missed doing one thing, which we always do. We're going to add a link to their LinkedIn profiles in the description. But you definitely have the names as well. Ian Bowman, Stephen Bader, Raul Jimenez. But again, we're going to link to their LinkedIn profiles so that you can connect with them. Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will see you next time.